It's a Saturday morning in Newcastle, 1985. There's a queue outside a shop that sells everything from screwdrivers to comic books, from goldfish to greetings cards. Near the front, someone fills a paper bag with pick and mix, weighed by hand and priced by the ounce. One sweet at a time, while a till bell rings somewhere near the back of the shop. That shop has been part of this high street for 3 generations. Everyone in this queue assumes it always will be. Within 25 years, it will be gone completely, along with 3 other shops just like it, each one brought down by a completely different mistake. One of those mistakes still shapes how you shop today, whether you've noticed it or not. For most of the 20th century, the high street wasn't simply where people bought things. It was where a town's entire week revolved. Saturday mornings followed a set route. The butcher first, then the chemist, then whichever department store had the best window display that month. Shop assistants recognized regular customers on site and remembered what they usually bought, right down to their preferred size or their children's names. Credit was arranged with a handshake and a ledger, decades before anyone carried a card, let alone a phone. A family might run an account at the local department store for months at a time, settling up whenever wages allowed, on nothing more than the manager's word that they were good for it. Every major British town stocked its own version of the same handful of national names. A shopper in Newcastle and a shopper in Plymouth bought from the same shelves, wore the same coats, and carried the same branded bags home. Children were taken to the same 3 or 4 shops for birthdays and Christmas, whichever town they grew up in, so that the high street became part of the memory itself, not just the backdrop to it. That consistency lasted for generations, and it felt permanent. Then, across roughly 15 years, 4 of the biggest names on that high street disappeared, one after another, for 4 completely different reasons. The first name on that list was also the one with the longest queue outside its door. Woolworths opened its first British store in Liverpool in 1909. By the 1980s, it had grown into something closer to a national institution than a shop. Under one roof, it sold records, toys, kitchenware, stationery, and sweets. And it was one of the few places most parents trusted to find exactly the right present for under £1. Its pick and mix counter became a piece of shared national memory, so recognizable that people who never bought anything else there still remember the smell of it. Warm sugar, cardboard, and the faint plastic scent of the scoops themselves. Woolworths' collapse came down to something far more mundane than declining popularity. A sudden loss of credit. When the 2008 financial crisis hit, suppliers grew nervous about extending credit to a retailer that was already struggling to turn a profit year after year. Without that credit, Woolworths couldn't stock its shelves properly ahead of Christmas, the single busiest trading period of its entire year, and without stock, there was nothing left to sell. Administrators were called in that November. Store by store, the closing down signs went up, and shoppers who had never seen the shop struggle came in one last time to see the shelves half empty and the fittings sold off. By January 2009, the final Woolworths stores were pulling their shutters down for the last time. A business that had survived 2 world wars, rationing, and decades of economic ups and downs didn't outlast one credit crunch. It simply ran out of the trust that kept its shelves stocked. Woolworths was the first big name to go. It wouldn't be the last. British Home Stores opened its first shop in Brixton in 1928, with prices originally capped at £1, so ordinary families could afford everything inside. By the 1990s, it had grown into a fixture of nearly every British town centre, known for its homeware, its clothing, and its no-fuss approach to filling a house from top to bottom, from curtains to cutlery to a child's first school uniform. The cause of BHS's collapse traces back to a single decision made years before the final closing down sale. In 2000, retail magnate Philip Green bought the company. In 2015, with the business struggling, he sold it for £1 to a group of buyers with no retail experience at all. Within a year, BHS collapsed into administration. As the dust settled, it emerged that the company's pension scheme was short by hundreds of millions of pounds. A gap that triggered a parliamentary inquiry, dragged Green's own reputation through Parliament, and cost thousands of people their jobs. The shops themselves hadn't lost their customers. Shoppers were still walking through the doors right up until the final weeks. The company standing behind those doors had already been hollowed out, long before anyone outside the boardroom knew there was a problem at all. BHS's story took a single bad decision to unravel. Debenhams needed two separate problems to arrive at once. Debenhams traced its roots back almost 250 years to a single draper's shop in Georgian London. By the 20th century, it had grown into one of the anchor department stores of nearly every major shopping centre in the country, as well known for its in-store cafes and restaurants as for its clothing rails, the kind of shop where a family could spend an entire afternoon without ever leaving the building. Debenhams's end came from two directions at once. Years before its closure, a private equity buyout had loaded the company with heavy debt, the kind that limits how much a business can invest in refreshing its stores or building a proper website. Debenhams kept trading through that slowly for over a decade, patching up stores that were starting to look tired next to newer competitors. Then the pandemic arrived, and months of forced closures finished what the debt had already started. In December 2020, Debenhams entered liquidation. By May 2021, all of its remaining UK stores had shut their doors for the final time, ending nearly 2.5 centuries of trading almost overnight. Even now, it remains the most searched-for closed retailer in the country, ahead of every other shop on this list, with hundreds of thousands of people searching for it every single month. More Britons miss Debenhams than any other name on this high street. Not every name on this list belonged to the town centre. The last one lived a few miles outside it. Toys R Us arrived in the UK in the 1980s and quickly became the shop every child wanted to be taken to. An enormous warehouse where a single aisle could hold more toys than most local shops stocked in their entire building, with a red giraffe on the sign outside and a trolley too big for most car parks. In 2005, a group of investment firms bought the company in a leveraged buyout, loading it with more than $6 billion in debt. That debt never went away. It sat on the company's books for over a decade, quietly eating away at the money that should have gone into refreshing stores or building a website that could compete online. By the time Amazon and other online retailers began pulling its customers away, Toys R Us had almost nothing left to fight back with. Its stores grew tired-looking. Its prices stopped being competitive, and its UK arm built up a tax bill of £15 million it couldn't pay. In March 2018, all 100 remaining British stores closed for good, taking more than 3,000 jobs with them. And a shop that had defined a generation's Christmas lists vanished within a matter of weeks. 4 shops, 4 different endings. Woolworths ran out of credit at the worst possible moment. BHS was sold for £1 and stripped of its pension security. Debenhams carried old debt into a pandemic it couldn't survive. Toys R Us spent over a decade paying off a takeover instead of investing in itself. Look closely, though, and a pattern starts to form underneath all 4 stories. In every case, the company had taken on debt or financial risk that had nothing to do with serving customers on the shop floor. Once that debt needed repaying, every decision that followed existed to satisfy it, not to keep shoppers happy or shelves stocked. Store managers and shop floor staff had little to do with any of it. They simply inherited the consequences. This wasn't unique to these 4 names. Retail analysts have pointed out that a disproportionate share of major store closures over the past 2 decades involve businesses owned by private equity firms, loaded with debt from a takeover rather than built up gradually through trading. The high street didn't die because people stopped wanting to shop in person. It died because the businesses running the shops made financial decisions years earlier that left no room to survive the first real shock that came along. Walk down most British high streets today and the buildings are often still standing, even when the shops inside them are gone. The old Woolworths on the corner might now sell vapes or operate as a charity shop, its original mosaic floor tiles sometimes still visible under a newer till counter. A former BHS could be sitting empty behind boarded-up windows or converted into flats above a smaller retailer. Some old Debenhams buildings have been split into gyms, offices, or indoor markets, their grand staircases now leading up to a spin class instead of a perfume counter. Where a Toys R Us once stood, you're more likely to find a retail park unit half filled with a discount furniture chain than a shelf of toys. The buildings remain mostly. The shops inside them and the version of shopping they represented don't. What's left is a kind of outline, a shape on the high street where something used to be, still recognizable if you know what you're looking for. None of these 4 shops closed because Britons stopped shopping. They closed because, one by one, they ran out of the thing that had kept them standing for decades. A business built to last, rather than one built to be sold, loaded with debt, or squeezed for one last profitable quarter. That's perhaps worth remembering next time you walk past an empty shop front with a familiar shape. It wasn't always going to end this way for any of them. Take care of yourselves and each other.